back. We are live once again from the Fintech and Dreams studio here in Copenhagen Fintech during the Copenhagen Fintech 2020 Global. Today, I have the pleasure to bring to you for the next 25 minutes a panel on sustainable innovation, covering what it is and perhaps shining a bit of a critical light on some of the conceptions coming from the Nordics at this time. Sustainable innovation is, of course, a topic close to our hearts here in Copenhagen Fintech, with the Copenhagen Fintech Week focusing on it, but also something we have a chance to work on an almost daily basis now, supporting the Nordic startup scene and the established financial sector in the innovation efforts. Joining me today is Claus here in the lab, and then we also have Stine and Amit joining us online. These are people who are much more knowledgeable than I am, so it's a great pleasure to have the chance to ask you some questions today, and I look forward to spending some time with you. Stine and Amit, can you hear us okay?
Yes, clear, yes. Thank you.
Stine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, that's good.
Hi, I'm Stine Kirstein Junge. I work with the United Nations Development Program, UNDP. I'm also the woman behind the SDG Accelerator for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, which is a new innovation program, business innovation program in UNDP that has been developed and tested over the last 2 years with 32 small and medium-sized industrial companies in Denmark. We are rolling it out globally as we speak. So one program is running in Moldova and another one is running in Bosnia, and we have a new one coming up in Q8. And there is a sector-specific one just launched in Denmark. It's a maritime SDG accelerator. And then we have worked with Copenhagen Fintech Lab to launch a pilot with 6 Nordic fintech startups that we will work with also with the same methodology and tools that we have worked with in the SDG accelerator.
Thank you, Stine. Amit is having a bit of webcam issues, so you'll have to live with seeing me and Claus while he introduces himself. But Amit, can I get you to say hi?
Of course. Hello, Amit Desai, CEO of CO2HERO, so very much in the relevant space, as it were. And I'll take this opportunity to simply say that we, in fact, are thinking about all things sustainable innovation related, and especially for consumers who are looking to better their daily lives from a CO2 perspective. I think, simply put, we are there to do one thing, and I know we're going to be talking about it a little bit later, which is to make sure that we are doing this in a way that is for all people, and more importantly, adding value to the way under which they think about impact and sustainability in general. And of course, doing their best to therefore better the world that we all live in. Prior to that, 20 or so years in a number of different areas of the world, across London, New York, and Hong Kong, mostly focused across financial services.
Thank you, Amit. And finally, joining me in the studio, Claus.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Claus Hjort. I work for Danske Bank, a big Nordic universal bank. My responsibility is to run a team called Growth and Impact, and our mission is to help Nordic startups to scale their business, but also to improve their positive impact. And we do that on a number of different activities, helping them with fundraising, recruitment, going international, and helping them being a traditional bank as well. And I'm very much looking forward to this debate. I think fintechs and banks have a huge role to play in driving us to a more sustainable world.
So as you can see, a great crowd of stakeholders representing a very broad knowledge across the topic. And just to help us set the stage a bit, a very brief question. Sustainable innovation is a very big topic. Could I get all three of you in turn to just say, when you hear sustainable innovation, what do you actually think of? Claus, would you...
Sure. Maybe I can tell about the ingredients that I think should be in place before you could call it a sustainable innovation. So first of all, you need to have sustainable consideration as a starting point, no matter at the stage of your company. So from the very idea to you build it and you launch it in the market. For us, it's also important that you think big. So that needs to be some kind of scalable element into it. And then we are a true believer in using profit as a driver for being a sustainable business. So it needs also to have something in terms of commercialization into it.
Great. And maybe I can jump in a little bit. And I think playing on what you mentioned, Claus, right? Thinking big. Well, CO2HERO thinks big, and more importantly, combining it with something that is in fact commercial or for profit in a way that adds value. Right? For us, sustainable innovation is all about adding value, and specifically to consumers, in a way that they really can feel, empowered to make change in whatever it is that they choose to do, whether it's how they buy, they live, they eat, they move, but in fact doing it in a way that is smarter for the climate in our particular case, but in fact in a way that helps us to live our lives in a better way overall. And I think those two ingredients, I would say, are uber important. But maybe one other ingredient, just to play on the same theme, is the simple fact that we need to do this in a way that really tries to change the behavior of people, because that's one of the hardest things to do when it comes to sustainable innovation in my mind, and that's something that we think a lot about at CO2HERO.
Thank you.
So I'll jump in here. I'm seeing this from a UNDP perspective. So I want to emphasize that sustainable innovation is, for us, for me, is the Sustainable Development Goals. And they are the challenges of our time. That's also the greatest needs of our time. This is where we need solutions. So sustainable innovation is needed to create those solutions. And then I can add to that businesses, especially small and medium-sized enterprises and startups, are key to coming up with these solutions. And it's probably not business as usual. It's new types of businesses where you use your already existing know-how and technology to bring them to new sectors to scale. It's a short version. But also I want to mention that the SDG accelerator that work with has a premise that you have to be able to if you actually want to create sustainable.
Stine, we are getting a bit of bad connection from you. Could I ask you to maybe turn off your webcam?
Yes.
See if that helps. Thank you. Now, I heard most of what you said, and I think I know the rest. So I'll just take that up and go with the second question. Now, I heard you mention the SDGs. I also heard some talk about profitability, which is of course a key component for scalability, which is a necessary ingredient for creating true impact, in my mind at least. But there seems to be a bit of a conflict here between the purpose-driven sustainability and impact versus commercial viability on the other hand. Claus, could I get you to shed a bit of light on what you think about this?
Yeah, that's a common topic for discussions, I would say. But let me just give some notes on our view on this. So we are definitely looking for for-profit companies, and I believe most of us accept that financial return is a driver for many businesses. And if we accept that, then it would just be sad if we only accepted that for bad business and not for good business. So our take is that we should stop looking at money as the evil, and instead looking at it as if you are able to build a business that can make a profit, then it gives you the freedom as a founder, as an investor, to stick to the agenda that you decided from the very beginning. And that's why we think that looking for profit should be the essence of all sustainable innovation as well, because it gives them the freedom to stick to that agenda.
Amit, I guess you as a founder are happy to hear that this is the interpretation.
Well, to be honest, as CEO, for me, right, it's not quite about commercial viability in its own right. I mean, of course, that's a necessary ingredient, but it's a balance, right? And we know this from having spent quite some energy and time having focus groups at CO2HERO look at what they believe is going to be valuable for what we're soon launching. And for those that are interested, it's on the 21st of September in Denmark. Sorry, I had to say it. But I think the important part for us is to strike a balance in a way that we are able to deliver value to consumers who don't see this as us pushing sponsorship or a commercial approach towards them that makes them feel that we've done something that actually isn't true to the values that we are trying to represent in terms of bettering the world that we live in, and getting it right in a way that lets them see that the value actually is there for them in how they want to think about changing their daily behavior and their daily lives, and ways under which to act upon that. But also, of course, behind the scenes to make sure that we are driving this forward. And Klaus, you're absolutely right, in a way that is sustainable from a commercial perspective, but not making that the reason as to why we need to exist and to drive that force forward, right? I think a lot of impact companies in many ways have done the opposite, right? Not for profit, which is great, and it's seen often to be a project, but it's also not something that lasts for a very long time in several cases. And for us, striking the balance is what we believe is going to actually make that viable, both for us, but also for the consumers that we serve. And then I think that balance is in fact what is necessary to get this right.
Thank you, Amit. Just a question or a comment from Klaus, and then I would like to hear your thoughts as well, Stine.
Yeah, because of course you can also distinguish between looking for positive impact or reducing your negative impact. So imagine if you are a startup from the get-going looking for how to deal with food waste, for example. So every time you grow 1 unit of your business, you automatically grow 1 unit of impact. Then of course there's not a trade-off. On the contrary, if you are more looking at reducing your negative impact, then of course you need to be cautious of which of these two drivers you put first. Is it the impact or the profit? So my perspective is also heavily influenced that we are totally focused on the ones that tries to create positive impact, where there is a positive correlation between growing your business and growing your impact.
So I have a follow-up question for that, but Stine, I would like to just hear your thoughts first.
Yes, so I'm in agreement with the fact that you have to be able to make a commercial viable business solution if you want to create sustainable impact, because without that commercial viable business solution, you will not be able to neither implement or scale your impact. So that is absolutely key and somehow a precondition. When that's said, I've worked with 32 small and medium-sized enterprises now, and it's very difficult to do business development and business acceleration. And when you then put impact into that cocktail, it easily gets kind of swiped away if there are other more burning issues. So what I've learned is that it's really important that you have some effective tools and some good facilitation to ensure that impact is measured. It's actually embedded into your business plan, the SDG impact, so that you have KPIs for SDGs, as well as you have KPIs for your commercial performance. So, and then that leads to the next question, which is that you also should have some available data to measure that impact, and that's also interesting to discuss.
And this is, of course, one of the bigger discussion points, especially for innovation coming out of the Nordics, as we see it, with a lot of fintech startup at least being predominantly focused on establishing the necessary preconditions for actually measuring this impact in one way or another. Now, I think this is a topic we should dwell upon a bit, because I know that there are differing opinions, and we also promised a bit of critical light today on the story of the Nordics as being leading within the SDGs, which we've heard repeatedly during some of the other keynotes and panel debates here. Now, there's generally a really positive perception of the impact that we in the Nordics are able to create and go out into the world and sort of further the agenda for, especially in regards to impact startups coming out of the Nordics. However, we also just heard from Sasha Bellick, who was live on a keynote on the global sustainability track, that perhaps we might not be as strong in a global context as we like to tell ourselves. And I know that you, Klaus, and you, Stine, both have some thoughts on this area as well, and the same is true for you, Amit. So, in the context of global sustainable innovation, how good are the Nordics actually?
May I go first?
Yes, you may.
So, because I want to share some data on this topic. I would love my answer to be straight. We are really, really good and we're driving the agenda. And I also we have some good conditions for doing that, looking at how we have done within renewable energies. If we look at how the Nordic societies are built, our infrastructure for startups. However, our latest analysis that we did this spring, looking at more than 1,000 impact startups in the Nordics, told a little different story. That and a very, very important element of scaling your business and growing it is, of course, to be able to attract risk capital. And we just have to face that there are capital cities across Europe, Asia, and US that are more epicenter for capital. So in London, for example, I believe close to 23% of all venture-backed impact companies are located in London. In Sweden, they're shooting above their presence. So 9.4% of all impact startups in Europe are based in Sweden. And you have to compare that with only 5% of all impact or all tech startups being located in Sweden. So Sweden is definitely doing something really, really good. But I don't see that trend coming strong in Denmark, in Norway and Finland. No. So I think our reputation about being good societies and having traction of legacy companies within renewable energies, we should be careful that that is not a sleeping pillow for us in order to get something really great going on in the impact startups.
Amit, as the CEO of an impact startup coming out of the Nordics, is this something that you can recognize or perhaps even have drawn upon yourself in the storytelling regards to your startup?
Sure. So I think, we've always said, right, that at CO2HERO that we have a global vision. And it's because we recognize up front that the problem we're solving for is in fact a global problem, right? And it's supported by UN SDG number 13, the one that focuses, of course, on the climate, and specifically for us, CO2. Now, I don't disagree with Klaus by any means, right? There are different pockets, but there are also different market dynamics that drive a lot of what I think you're telling the story around. I think for us, what is truly interesting and important is that we are using Denmark as a starting point. There is a perception, absolutely. Now, whether it's true or false, there are different arguments to be made on either side of that equation. But I think that in general, the Nordics are further ahead, and Denmark is one of them, of course, when it comes to sustainable innovation. Now, we all know that may not be wholly true, but what we do know is, from a startup perspective, I have to say, right, we play on that. It's very natural for us to leverage that perception as we sort of talk to the market, and we will do that. In fact, we have another event that we're launching in New York, in fact, on the 22nd of September, which allows us to tell the world, as it were, about who we are and why we choose to exist, and that is in fact all about, right, exactly that, which is that our vision is a global vision, and that we believe we're solving a common problem that impacts a lot of us, no matter where we are. And I think some pockets, especially the larger ones like the UK, some other parts of course, the Western European region, and of course the US, have recognized this and have in many ways been ahead of the curve in recognizing this. But I think the point is simple, which is that this as a problem is very much global. It's something that we need to think hard about, and I think the ability to sort of commercialize, given that I think the conversation started with that, this as an opportunity to then scale and drive further innovation is where the real hurdle is, right? The Nordics traditionally, I think, have done well with the early stage companies, impact or even broader tech, as it were. Some have obviously, sort of burst through that bubble and made an entry into other parts of the world. But the funding, the ability to actually commercialize and drive the scale and the growth historically has not always been there. And I think, in many ways, that's because often the vision is to start small and then become big. But if you think big and really believe that you can be big, which we do at CO2HERO, then in many ways you're already solving for a global problem. And you're simply picking the markets under which you want to build upon to help solve that global problem. So that's our angle on it. And it's, we think, fascinating angle and one that justifies our reason to think big as well.
And Stine, you coming from the UNDP, which is of course an organization with an incredible global awareness, could you share a bit of your thoughts about how you perceive sort of the sustainable innovation in the Nordics versus in a global context?
Yes, I will come with 2 points. So first point is that looking at Denmark and the Nordics, there is not overwhelming how businesses, and here I'm talking about all kinds of businesses, everything from small to large, they are not perceiving the global markets, the developing countries and the emerging economies as places to go. It's too risky. It's just not where you start out. And I understand the risky part of it, but it's actually where there is a great need for these sustainable business solutions that we're talking about today. So if you want to venture into that part, you have to deal with the fact that you have to get beyond the Nordics. And the Nordics lack that vision and guts. I'm very frank now. So then on the other point, I wanted to mention that I think actually the Nordics do have an obligation to be front runners in this field. And this obligation or idea comes from a scoping mission I went on to Ukraine for figuring out how to design and adapt an SDG accelerator for a country like Ukraine, which is huge, places where the is really, really high, and then you have conflict-hit areas like, the Crimea area. And I remember there was a guy running a whole bunch of companies.
Stine, we are having a bit of bad connection from you.
Are
Could
you
you
missing
repeat
me?
that? Yeah, just a bit. Just repeat the last bit, thanks.
Yes. So did you hear the fact that I went on a scoping mission to Ukraine?
Yes, we did.
Good. And there was a group of companies in a conflict-hit area being very interested in innovation and sustainability, because this is a ticket to export to Europe. But it's just really, really... And now I can see the connection is running out again. Oh, my God. Can you hear me?
On
Can
and
you
off,
hear me?
mostly on.
Okay. So what happened was that they said that companies in the Nordics doing this, they're so spoiled. They have the infrastructure, the tradition for public-private partnerships, etc. Yeah, there is some competitive advantage that. Can you hear me?
Somewhat. So if I'm getting what you're saying correctly, what I hear is the preconditions in the Nordics are very good, which maybe creates not a lazy, but certainly a less hungry startup environment, whereas maybe outside elsewhere in the world with poor preconditions, it's sort of more inherent that you have to work your ass off, so to say, to get there. Which maybe levels out the playing field, even though the conditions are bad, and perhaps even skews it in favor of some of the people who come from areas with systemically worse conditions for startups. Is that
Brilliant.
But you could also just recognize that sometimes being a startup, you have to be close to your market. So let's just accept that sometimes you as a Nordic entrepreneur start by local markets, and if we then jointly could help them to go to markets, not just the Western countries, but also to the low-income markets. And I guess that's where you will build a lot of learnings in the acceleration program you're building now, Stine. So we could see from our analysis that only 4% of the 1,000 startups that we looked at are serving the low-income markets. And I guess we all agree that if we really want to create huge impact, we need to go into these markets, solving the problems with food waste or hunger or equality. So we would be happy to help Nordic startups looking for those problems and then helping them to go abroad, solving it, and not just going to the US or to other parts of Europe.
Yes, and thank you for that comment, Klaus. It actually showed in the program that having a presence in 170 plus countries with, staff that are knowledgeable about the challenges in the local context, but also have access and contacts to partners that are needed to actually go and test solutions in countries you're not familiar with. That is absolutely important, and we learned that.
So we are running out of time, and we're actually at the time, but I have a final question I would like to ask to all three of you. If you were to start an impact startup tomorrow, what would it do? I think that's a fun topic to end on. Amit, of course, I know you are in the process and can't really unveil it, but we're looking forward to hearing more. But Klaus and Stine, perhaps you could share a bit.
Yeah. I have few
interrupt. I'm more than happy to share a little bit. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, then share a bit, and then.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Amit.
Sure. Okay. So I'll do this very quickly. For us, CO2HERO, very simple. We're solving exactly this type of problem. And we do it across 3 different areas. One, which is a platform under which we believe we can allow consumers to really understand and hopefully feel inspired around all things CO2, whether it's around articles, recipes, life hacks, things that really allow them to enable themselves to do something different in their lives. Second is around something that hopefully encourages them to do even more. And that's through, either taking challenges and earning rewards and gamifying that experience in a way that really makes it interesting and hopefully fun, eventually sharing it amongst a community of friends and family, et cetera, et cetera. And at the same time, doing it through, what we are starting to think about as some version of consumer with company matchmaking, in a way that, right, we have access to over 10,000 global publicly listed stock traded companies that are, sort of sourced through a third party that is actually quite reputable. And more importantly, doing that in a way that allows users to see the CO2 scoring of those companies. And more importantly, to do it in a balanced way under which they can also look at what it means for local companies. And bringing it all together under one platform and hopefully being able to do it in a way that allows you to understand your own footprint relative to that footprint, which is hopefully going to be better as a result of on one hand, taking action yourself, and on the other hand, of course, doing it through our platform. That's us in a nutshell, solving exactly the problem of hopefully what we think is sustainable innovation.
We wish you all the best with that, Amit.
Thank you.
Klaus, I saw that you were dying to say something as well.
I don't know if I'm dying, but I know how much important passion is for the entrepreneur. So I would definitely be eager to do something within the food, also knowing that there's big problems to be solved within sharing equality of foods, but also serving a rising population of the planet. So something related to food.
And Stine, what about you? What would your passion project be?
To embed circular economy in all productions everywhere.
That sounds simple.
But it could also be, develop that startup that could allow for putting a price on externalities. I don't know, we're getting closer and closer to exactly that, but that's something that I think could be a change maker.
That's a big topic that I would love to get into, but unfortunately we don't have the time. But thank you, Stine, Amit and Klaus, for taking the time to join us here today. And I hope all of you out there listening have found this panel debate inspirational and have found something that you can take with you and reflect a bit over in your daily time. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation.
Of course.
Thank
Have
you.
a lovely day.
Likewise.